So we're going to set the upholstered headliner back in, and really it's best as a two-man job. You can do it alone, but it's a little bit funky. Honestly, this is just a little bit of shimming and getting it to fit. What I like to do is push a little bit of pressure in the center here when I set it in and get it to bow a little bit in the middle. The front corners are what are going to be your point of focus as you bring it in, and you're going to want to keep it level. You're not going to want to stick one side in and then try to wedge the other side in up afterwards. You're going to try to get it both to come in at the same plane and then flange out. And afterwards, we'll take our finger and put the headliner behind the airbag. Okay? So these might be in the way, but there we go. I like to make sure that the A-pillars are pulled out in a way, out of the way of the headliner as we go to put it in.
How's that coming along? Pretty good.
Let's back up here. Pull yours down this way. Just pull yours down a little bit there first. Okay. Good. The A-pillar here. Hold up. Got the A-pillar here. I gotta pull it back up. This A-pillar is not. There we go. You good?
Yep.
So it's a little bit of a struggle and a wrestling match. And then you're just pulling this edge right over, and we're in. As long as your screw holes are lining up with these openings on the side, then you should be able to tuck everything right back in there. There we go. Nice. So then the top can be clipped back in. And after you get this in, we'll go ahead and put the visors right back up. And the visors will end up clipping, kind of holding the headliner all together, along with these little clips that go into the back. Okay, so after you've done your thin slit, it's time to put the furring strips in. And the first thing we're going to do, one furring strip, the one that goes across the ceiling, we're actually going to cut a little bit. So I've got my marker here, and on the front, I run it about 5 inches past this second rib, and then I come down here and I run it a few inches past this rib. But this is not a critical mark, but it just allows me to overhang the rib on either side just a little bit, and this is where we're going to cut this one. On the passenger side, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to put this just where it overhangs a little bit, and we'll cut both of these off. That's the way we start with for the ceilings. So while those are getting cut, with the walls, we simply put the furring strip up against the flange that comes down here. So again, we're setting it right up underneath this flange. I put my screw. This is the area that I'm going to try to hit. So I'll put this right about here. And just slide it up right in there. Don't over tighten them. You don't want to strip out the metal. These are self-tapping. And then one across the back here. We may trim this little piece out of the way, but I like to put one up in the corner back here too. Great. And then, okay, same thing, right up under the bottom. The key on the passenger side is actually the front here. And the back, you just want to barely hook it over the back so you have something to tap into right here. And the front, you want to make sure you're not that you're hanging back from the middle line quite a bit. The slide liner will come in here, and this can interfere. Same with when we set the top one, we're going to hang it way back from the center line. I'll show you that when we set the top one. When setting the top one, again, we're just overrunning these top ribs by about 5 inches. The key here is that you have this big OEM hole, and I'm just putting my finger to the side of this hole, and that's where the side of this top first strip goes. And then I set a screw to hold it there and drop them. There are a couple OEM holes back there that you can miss if you slip into one of these OEM holes. You just pull it off to the side, make sure you miss it.
You're rolling.
So again, we're using this OEM hole as a guide. Put your finger against it and then slip this down. That's where you're going to use it to punch. Now the front is important. Let's go to the front real quick. The front is important so that we back this off to just the very edge, just enough to hook this edge in, because the slide liner is going to come down right through here, and it will bump it if it's in the way. So the next point is we want to decouple the OEM wiring harness, and we're going to zip tie it to the back of our furring strip. So I'm just using some wire cutters to unhook them first.
He swapped me out D5 hydronic tube, and I installed
I've changed the plumbing, but you know, refit that and did the
The best tool for these are actually just regular old dikes that you can reach in there and snip them with. We're working with what we have here.
I got one of those.
You got some? Okay.
You're done, yeah?
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, so after you remove the factory clips, the long zip ties that you get in the electrical kit, you'll use to zip tie up to the back side of this furring strip. What I do is loop it around coming this way so that when you zip tie it, you can actually have this little clip end up on the front side of here, because you don't want this facing down. That's going to get in the way of the panel when it goes up. So we just do that, and I zip tie them on either side of these ribs so that they really keep it snug at that critical area where the rib is. And I'll move my way down and zip tie them up around the rib first. And if you have extra zip ties, you can then put them in the middle. In the middle areas, this can actually live above the furring strip, be zip tied up above. But again, I start with just getting them on either side of the ribs.
benchmark, even though they're specialized.
So when you do this midline rib, be sure to zip tie your light wire to the front of your furring strip, and that will keep it out of the way also. There we go. If you have a magic hand to come in out of nowhere to clip those zip ties, that really helps too. A magic hand is always really helpful.
Everyone wants a magic hand.
Everybody needs a magic hand. Alright, and once you're done with this, you're ready to install your panel kit. So we open up the panel kit, and basically what you're going to find is a stack of panels. On the very top will be the light panels. But what I did here is I pulled out this this door panel for the sliding door, and you'll want to use the old OEM panel that was covering it as a template to punch holes in the sliding door that you get. And so basically we center the sliding, the OEM panel is a little bit smaller than our panel. Our panel covers a little bit more of the door, so you're going to center it inside of the panel that we're going to punch the hole on. So it gives a little bit less than a 1/4 inch, maybe 3/16 reveal all the way around. And then I like to use the clamp. I usually set them up so that you're clamping right next to the hole that you're going to punch, and punch the hole with a 5/16 bit. Gives you a little bit of play, centered. And you're just going to work your way around. And again, I kind of like to move my clamp with where I'm punching the hole. And punch the holes in the same areas that you set the rib nuts in earlier. You can set the center one. I generally avoid setting the center one, and I use double-sided tape on the back of the center of the door. just because I don't like to see the bolt in the middle of the field, but really that's just a call on your part. So go right ahead and punch the holes throughout the perimeter of the sliding door panel.
Did you blow him some kisses? Yeah, several. Perfect. Jeff. Must have written him a really nice note, getting a call back that quickly.
So when you pull open the panel kit box, you'll have a set of these long set screws, and you're going to use just a few of those to fasten the panels into place, but mostly you're going to be using these bolts, which are also in here, the little button head black bolts, and you'll also have 6 of these ring fasteners to get you started for fastening cargo down. The top 2 panels will be your electrical panels. They are already pre-wired with the plug in. One will be a little longer than the other. The shorter one that has 2 square ends is for the front, and you'll see when we put it in, you'll notice that we'll put the single light on both the front and the back panel are in the center of the van, and the dual lights are on either ends of the ceiling. Where I like to start with the panels in installing in the vehicle is on the rear quarter panels. So I'm just unloading these first couple of panels here. To get to these bottom panels. Now, these are also going to be in your kit, and after you install the ceiling panels, these are the little rings that are the covers for the lights. So hang on to these until after you install your ceiling panels, and then you can put the trim on. So when you go to put these lower panels in, we start with the lower panels, and we're going to have 12-volt outlets or USB outlets, and we give you 4 of each so that you can choose where you're going to put the 12-volt and the USB outlets. So the way I think about it is, where am I going to plug in a fridge or a utility, and those would need the 12-volt style outlets, and where am I going to want to charge a phone or a device, and that's where I'd be putting my USBs. So Jenna and Craig is who has this vehicle. In this vehicle, we're going to put 1 USB in the back here and a 12-volt up here, and then each of the dual holes will get 1 of each, a 12-volt and a USB. So to do this, you're going to unscrew this little fastener off the back here, and then slip the USB through the hole, and this cap can slide around, so I like to place it on top so that gravity naturally lets it fall, and then I like to set the light down. So this is where the position is that I know I want it in the end. And then on the back, I am just tightening that ring back over the top of the the threading, re-threading it back over it and getting it tight. At a certain point, it's easier to turn the whole system and I'll just turn it right back around until it's facing up and down.
How's business today?
And It's where we like it. Okay, so now it's all tightened to the back here. And we're going to put a 12 volt on the front side of the panel. So Nathan's going to put that on the front side of the panel. And if you come back around here, so when you go to plug these in, you will notice a negative and a positive. It will make a difference. If you put the positive on the negative and the negative on the positive, this outlet will not work. So it's usually the first thing to troubleshoot. If you plug everything together and it doesn't work, troubleshoot that you put these on the correct sides of the outlet. Now, well, before we go to put this in, over here, we're actually going to cut this off right around here, pull this out, and I like to sort of stuff this insulation back up into this void here and allow for the whole back of this outlet to slip into that space. We're going to cut away the insulation behind each one of these outlets. This much insulation is enough to block this, and it breaks down the connectivity here. We want these to not be having too much pressure pushing or pulling them. This gives enough room for it to sit nicely behind the panel, but you do have to remove the thin slit. Right here I cut out the thin slit, and I actually just, what I cut out, I turned sideways and stuffed right up in here. But this will allow me to get the space to put in here. If you do not fill this area with thin slit, because your door hinge is going to come back into here, and if you really want, you can cut just a small circle out, depending on how how specific you want to be. But we cut a little bit of space out behind the thin slit. So now, when you go to put this in, we actually are going to put it underneath and make sure you pinch the fabric underneath this little black cutout here. We just slip it back, and you just want to keep up with it. Once it starts pinching, it's going to be a problem. So just keep it pushed in as you slide it back. And then you'll be able to slip it right back over. And once that's in, the top now can be bolted in a little bit more, but we're still going to leave it a little bit loose so we can drop our top panels in. Either way, it doesn't really matter. If you want to loosen the top, we can go ahead and tighten these in more. But that's the way you get this pocket to slip behind here and give you this nice finish. The last bit of installing these bottom panels is to put a set screw in the corner right here, and I like to put a set screw up here. This is really just to keep it from the bottom from kicking out and slipping down. So you want to make sure that you're not wedged super high up. If you want, you can tighten this top piece down and put a shim under there and put it right where you want it. This one's sitting nicely right where we like it. So I can go ahead and put 2 in the back, and in the front we set 1. And usually I just go 2 inches up, 2 inches in from the sides. Let's just lay it down a little bit. There we go.
The sad thing is I think that
rolling.
Okay, when we put this rear one in first, so that the forward one we put in, we butt it back up into the rear. Do not put the forward one in first, because you don't actually know where it's going to live in reference to the rear one. So put the rear panels in first, and then you'll put the forward one in. Plug in your outlets. Again, we cut away the thin slip behind it. Slip this in and butt it back. And once it's in place, there is a cover, which is right over here. There you go. So once this is in place, then there's the little cover that will go over this little box area. And this, if it comes with this thin slip or this Reflectix on it, it does not need it. So it goes flat here to cover up this hole. And then when you screw this in, it'll be what ends up holding these panels in place in the front here. I'm just being careful not to over tighten it. Okay, so this is solidifying this here, and we'll put one more set screw in the middle here and one more on the very end. And if we put it all the way on the very end, within an inch or so of the far front, it'll actually get covered. And the big thing here is you just want to make sure that it's up across the top here, so that you have plenty of space. All right, so all of the panels are fastened in just through these few set screws. Nothing's hanging on the set screws or being, pressure is being pulled on them. This track will lock the top in. I'm leaving it loose because we're still going to put this shroud in, and we're going to put these other panels in. And once we slip the panels down, we're able to slip them back up into the track, and we'll close this up and go ahead and tighten all of the track up. So when we put the shroud on, I actually just put a couple of pieces of the foil on the corners. It furs it out. This is a relatively thin shroud, so it'll help fluff the corners up and push them out. I set the bottom in first because the bottom will pass behind this the bottom track. And we lift it up into place. I can find this can now officially be tightened in to place. And once the top and the bottom is installed, these can actually be snugged up. You don't want to over tighten, but you do want to get it nice and snug. layers of your paneling in, you're going to want to put in your slide liner so that we can, and then we'll put in our 2 center ceiling panels, and then the last of it will be working on the side panels. This all goes together pretty smoothly. The slide liner is, we call it the slide liner because it's the headliner that goes above the sliding door, and it just got the nickname as the slide liner. So you'll have a big box that's shaped like this. It'll have the slide liner and then the little fuse block box. We used to put the fuse box up, or fuse block up here, so this sort of became the nickname as the fuse box, but cover. So that's in this big box, as well as this one, which is the slide liner. So this is the slide liner. We're going to set it in. There's a groove over here, and that groove sits nicely into here, and then the top will slip up in between the you know, the strut that we put in and the track. So I put this groove in and send it up into that groove up there, and once it's there, this weather stripping, actually we pull the weather stripping down, is the easiest method, but just roll it over.
Yeah, it's warm.
We're just pulling the weather stripping over the top of the panel here. Alright, so that goes in there. So I just make sure that this edge right here is nice and tight to the ceiling. You can see how we barely meet the edge of this the slat. So if we put this furring strip further over, we would have been in the way of this actually going all the way up. So down here, I'm now just going to put a set screw after it's all wedged up into the ceiling. You can kind of back it out nicely so it just sets nicely and it'll hold this in place. There's multiple ways of dealing with this. I've seen some of the installers use a shim behind it so they can put it in solid. I've seen other guys use a piece of a bracket that they put the OEM clip back into. And that's really up to you on how detailed you want to be. Put it in solid. I've seen other guys use a piece of a bracket that they put the OEM clip back into. And that's really up to you on how detailed you want to be. So after you put the slide liner in, we're going to set the center ceiling panels. There's a plug on one side. Oops, and that's on the, I'm gonna hold it up here for Gabe. He'll plug it in. And then make sure it's not draping over any of the there we go. And then we bump it up to the front here. And now these yeah, we got all our lights going. Now we'll actually set these bolts into those floating nuts that we found, or that we put on earlier. So we got these the button head black bolts. And what I do is I use my Allen wrench to go up in there and make sure I get the nut. There it is. And you want to push the ceiling up so it creates the contour. Okay, so this is the rear panel. And again, the plug is on the side with the one light that goes towards the center of the van. Right here, you'll see there's our floating nuts, and these are what we're going to bolt into. So I'm going to go ahead and put the plug in here and slip the panel underneath the one track and then back into our other track. Before we bolt this one all together, we're going to put our center track in. So in order to get this trim up into the corner, start with the ceiling, and you'll slip the ceiling into the top and push it up against the slide liner. Then you'll take the wall, put the wall against the bottom. And at this point, we actually want this top rail to be fairly secured, but not super tight, so we can get our bottom in there. I like to then secure it pretty good because we're going to wedge the top of the wall panel up into that corner, and when we do that, it's going to push a lot of pressure down. So we want to make sure that our bottom track is secured. When we push this top of the wall panel in, what it's doing is it's forcing the top ceiling panel up, and we're actually going to secure this into the wood slat with the screws. You're not aiming to go into the metal here, you're just aiming to get into the wood slat that we put across the back here. So I use 4. Are we good to go that way? Yeah, we're bumped in on the top here. So, and I usually come in about 2 inches down, 2 inches in from the corner to get that first screw set. And then I'll set one in the back. There you go. And same sort of thing, 2 inches in, 2 inches down. Get that one set. And then I just balance them out in the centers here.
Or tape measure.
Or you could use a tape measure and be very precise. After doing so many of them, you kind of get an eye for it. And that is your finished corner of the paneling system, and we'll mount our bags right across here. So we're going to set the corner in, and on the driver's side it's critical that you set the front ones first because you're going to bump them up against the front of the headliner here, or the back of the front headliner. And then remember, so the ceiling panel's going in here, no screws are going up, but you'll want to be hitting this piece of wood with the screws that you're setting into the wall panel. And you're going to be hitting the center of this wood slat. Let's grab the wall panel. We set that bottom edge down first, and with the wall panel, what we're lining up is the back corners. Okay, so we're not really concerned about what's happening with the front. We do want this. Oh, you know what? Let's put this track in nice and solid first. Are we lined up on the top, or we're pretty flush? Yeah. Okay. So we'll just make sure that our bottom track is set nice and tight, and give it a solid base before we wedge this panel up into its place.
want these two panels to line up flushy.
So we'll push this in, nice and solid. Go ahead and give it a good little whack in there so that it's nice and solid.
Little CPR.
Little CPR. So this is a good example of how far down you have to be. Once this is in nice and tight, I'm going to move down about 2 inches from that top edge so I can take a bite of that wood slat.
Snuggy.
All right.
You guys can come in. Just installing the last ceiling panel. It's so tight. Oh, sorry. Two small slits, 3 slits.
Thank you. This is the last piece of trim detail, and really the last piece of the initial kit. We'll put the B-pillars in, but other than that, all of the kit is put together. And this, again, it has that little ledge, and I slip that ledge up against the OEM headliner here. Press it into the ceiling so this top is nice and flat. And what you want to avoid is pushing this in and having it jam up like this. So you're going to hold this out, and it's a little bit of kind of getting the right place. There's a 3 axis is working here, and you'll set your screw into this flange against the back. Against the back of the box. I like to use an extension on the drill so that I put 2 in the back and I put 1 up in the ceiling, and that solidifies this into place. This little package here holds the cover, and it has 6 little screws. Some people like to use the screws. Some people say that they prefer to find a different method, or they paint the heads of the screws to fasten this cover on it. I've had other people use pieces of leather, just different things if they wanted to be a little trickier with how they cover that. But we provide you with this piece of plastic that has upholstery on it. Okay, so this is going to go in right here. Okay.
But it's nice to have the option to
The B-pillar will wrap around here, and there is one clip that you'll want to remove from the B-pillar, or if you really want to trim this edge up to work with this OEM pillar, you can trim the back of the B-pillar all the way down to the floor by about 1/4 of an inch. Drill a hole here, and the post of this clip will slip through. There's some modifications that you have to do to the back of this, and we don't do that. You can work with your custom installer or go through the process of yourself to do that, because it is a lot of modification on the actual Mercedes part. So we just leave that up to you guys to do if you want to go that far. Otherwise, it trims out nice all the way around the front here, and generally most people are pretty satisfied with leaving it that way and not going through the process of chopping up their B-pillar. We'll show you how that goes on next. The easiest way that I have found is to remove this slider from the B-pillar, and you'll put your seatbelt through it, and then you're going to hook. There's a slot right here that hooks onto the bolt, sort of, metal nub here, and then this slider piece, there's a slat right in here, and that hooks over the top of this little lever arm. And so what I do is I put the bolt on, or put that over the bolt, and I move this little piece up and down to where it now is over the top of that lever, and it can move up and down. Okay, so that's living there. And then the trick with this is these two hooks down here. You want them to go into these two slots. So when you put it over here, I put a little bit of pressure with my foot against the base to slip them over. Once they're slipped over, each of these little Christmas tree looking clips will slip into these slots. And you'll want to use this guide here, this plastic piece as a guide. It will fit into this hole, and this will fit into this top slot. And you just push it and give it some pressure, and it'll shove, it'll click shut. Okay, so again, I'm being very careful to make sure that those bottom hooks go into that slot. And then I line my little plastic piece up on the top here and give it a little shove. Snap this around, and you can hear it click in. And now it is completely sealed back up. You can see right here, this is the little gap that I was talking about. If people want to get very specific, this is where they can do special trim outs and make it super flush. This again doesn't seem to be too much of a problem for most people, and it serves its purpose perfectly well. This comes down, and you'll go ahead and bolt this right back into the bottom. Put in your D-ring on the bottom, and mount your little coat hook up on top, and it is finished out. Now, last little bit is to take this weather stripping and pull it back over to the top of the B-pillar cover, and that finishes it out. In the crew van, these will be bolted directly into your seat, and you won't be bolting through the B-pillar here. There's just two different types depending on what model vehicle you have. All right.
Wait one sec.
Yeah.
Where is this going? Yeah. None of the vans you showed me have.
No, actually, I tried to. So we had to go a different direction. Like, this is going to be really functional, man. This is kind of.
It's a pretty good system. I like it. It's I'm gonna have this storage plus the glove platform bed. I'm good to go. I'll get the floor.
Basically, we're putting the bed in, which takes about 5 minutes after this. This deck system is going into it, but it's a full kit that can drop into the van and basically go. So.
Yeah.